Some people say they don't want to go to heaven because it's so boring there. Then singing before the throne of somebody all time for all eternity doesn't seem to be too attractive. Others say, well, I do want to go to heaven because I'll get everything I want. It's like fulfilling all the desires, right? Anything we could imagine we would have, we could get, right? So it's like an open supermarket, just no price tags, right? You can get whatever you want. Of course, both perspectives are very, very distorted and not really reflecting what heaven is. Now, the problem is, of course, is for us very hard to imagine how heaven is, how the communion of saints is, if you're not there, and if it's really there's no way to really have a glimpse through the keyhole. Although we get a little bit of a glimpse in the texts of today, but again, they may not everybody may be able to grasp from these texts what this is really about. The first idea about heaven is wrong because if we really think that being before God and praising the Lord is something boring, we really neither understand who God is, nor do we understand what praising Him means. And one hasn't had the experience of God in a way which the saints in heaven will have. So it's understanding that there will be a misunderstanding. But still, this perception needs to be purified. And then the other one is wrong because it is a very self-centered idea, a very materialistic idea. To think just heaven is about me and that I get what I want, or what I love. But in reality, it's the other way around. In heaven, we will want and we will love what is there. Or better to say, who is there. And this opens up an interesting perspective, which is something I've been actually reflecting and meditating upon lately, which is, okay, so what does this really mean when we go to heaven and we find all sorts of people there? And C.S. Lewis has written very interesting texts about this. There's one essay of him, was actually a homily, which he gave once as or a sermon, better. He was Anglican, but sometimes they have special sermon series, and he gave a sermon on, it's called The Weight of Glory. I highly recommend reading that. I'm not going to detail here on this text. It's very interesting, amazing text. But then the other is The Great Divorce, which is a little book, interesting story. I also highly recommend reading it if you don't know it. And it's very revealing about how heaven is and is not, right? Or the life after death. It's an interesting perspective. And what struck me especially is, well, there's this office. I mean, it's a description in the first person, like he after death, even though he doesn't even realize he's dead at first, and so on. He gets to this special place where he's kind of like a spectator. Everything is like he doesn't fit in there, but then he observes. It's like a big park and nature and everything, but everything is kind of a little strange. But then all of a sudden there comes in this procession with all sorts of animals and creatures and whatever, and they carry this woman, right? And then looks like a divinity, like a goddess or something, and splendor and everything. And then if I remember this right, it has been a little while since I read it. It turns out that this was just Mrs. Smith next door. So somebody who in ordinary life was a very ordinary person, and all of a sudden in heaven, she's brought in there like a goddess, right, and shining, and then has there's lots of details to this, which maybe don't need to go into. But the point is this: when I look at the brother next to me, or the people I knew from my life before, and I would say, oh, do I want to spend eternity with them? Right? I'm sitting at dinner table and I don't even know what to talk about because he doesn't have the same interests as me, and then sometimes we start a little conversation and we get stuck and we don't even know what more to say, and Or he's always talking about these things or doing these things which annoy me and so forth, and then spending an eternity with these people. I can't really believe that. So there's this interesting clash between, these people we meet on the street, right? And then ordinary people, okay, why would they be glorious in heaven? Really? When you go to the airport and you see, okay, so what is going on there? And the point is that in this life, we have so many limitations to really understand who the other person is, who we are ourselves, but also who is the person next to me. We have a hard time understanding and grasping what the dignity of the human person is, of myself and of my neighbor. The word dignity is very much used and very much reflected upon in philosophy and anthropology and theology, but also in sociology and in out there, also in the political debate and so forth, and it's been used and abused. But I think the deepest grasp we don't really get. It's the value, but not value in the sense of a price tag again, right? But in the sense of how much weight there is in terms of value in a positive sense, no? In a person which is infinite, right? Not as infinite as God, but its own creature infinity. And so all the treasure which God has put into a human person's soul, with this dignity, but also richness which is there, it's almost like hidden in the heart of the person, and we can't really see it. But it's there, it's real. And sometimes we discover this. And when people love each other, they're actually getting a deeper look into this. And when people get married, they discover a lot of the wealth and the depth and the beauty of the other person. Unfortunately, that sometimes gets lost again, or gets covered up again by everyday life and by problems and this and that. But there was something discovered, there was something to see, hey, I want to be with this person forever. And that's why people get married. I don't want to let go anymore. We want to be together through all our life. So there's a bit of a foretaste of this. And in community, because it's not that we are married in that same sense, right? But we're living together, basically, our life, right? And we didn't choose exactly because this is so nice to me and whatever. But the truth is that when people get married, they discover something with one person which, in theory, one could discover in every person. And in heaven, we actually do. God opens our eyes to be capable of understanding the treasure of each of the others who are there. And there's no more limit of communication, because most of the time, our problems of relating to each other is because we don't really understand. I misunderstand what the brother said, and I can't even express myself well, and then, no, sorry, I meant it the other way, and how many times do you need to say sorry because we weren't able to communicate properly what we wanted to say, and then the other gets it still wrong, and whatever, no? And that's what creates conflicts, and that's what creates... And then in one sentence, you can only say that much, no? But there would be so many times, so much more to say, which we can't say, we don't have the time, the others don't give us the time to say it, or we don't have the time to say it, or we don't just have the words to say it. Right? Because there's so many things we could say and we don't even have the words. But all these problems in heaven won't be there anymore. The problems of limit of time and space and of misunderstanding, of errors, of just not knowing. God will take all these limits away. Because these limits, well, there's natural limits, of course, but the limits of error, the limits of mistake, and also the limits of that our passions go strange, and well, these are all consequences from original sin, which will disappear once we get to heaven. So the communion of saints really is a group of people who have no reason anymore not to love the other. But they have a lot of reason to love each other. Because all those limits and obstacles don't exist anymore. And by the way, a consequence from that thought is that after heaven, the next best creation or idea of God was purgatory. And this might sound very surprising, but I'm waiting for the day when I've done with my project and can write another book, which is on, or text at least, about purgatory. Because I think it's a fantastic thing that it exists. Why? Because if you think about, well, maybe ourselves, right? We don't want to judge others. And think, okay, now if I were to go to heaven now and live in this communion of saints where there's no limits and where there's everything, I'm actually ready for that. Would I be able to enter there? Would I be able to connect actually in this way? Or is there a lot of in me where I'm actually putting with my will, with my own choices, have put obstacles against me and others and against me and God? And these obstacles are still there. And things and choices I've made, God is not just going to snip them away with his finger. Because that would mean that our choices don't have consequences and they're not real. They just disappear, just like that. No, the choices we make in this life, God takes them seriously. And if these are bad choices, then they have consequences. And these consequences need to be sorted through. So if I'm selfish and I'm offending other people and I'm just looking for myself and I'm not doing my obligation or fulfilling my responsibilities or this and that, no, there's things there. And there's stain on my soul. And there's things which need to be polished, purified. And before I get to the communion of saints, this needs to be sorted through so that I can actually enter in this possibility. And that's what we will have tomorrow. That's why we have all saints. We pray for all those who are in this process. But then look at this. When we're in purgatory, maybe all of a sudden we realize that some of those stain goes off very fast. And all of a sudden a knot which was in our heart is being untied. Wow, I thought this would take much longer. And why all of a sudden does this happen? Because somebody is just praying for me. Somebody had just interceded for me in a mass, in a prayer for those faithful departed. Maybe somebody wasn't distracted after the prayer, after meals, and was actually praying for the faithful who have departed. Because we may just babble the words, but don't really think about it. But there's real people out there who are going through this process, and they're depending on our prayers. And when we really pray, then it will make a difference. Because otherwise, why do we pray it? If it doesn't make any difference. But it does make a difference. How? In the fact that in those moments, something will get faster and sped up, and maybe somebody even makes it right out. And then can join this communion of saints where there's no more limits of time and space, no more relationship issues, because there's perfect relationship of love there. So then, the last consequence of all of this is, okay, this is not just a nice perspective. Well, actually, we should make sure that we don't think this is just a dream. This is revelation. This is what we are celebrating today. That's why we have Mass. That's why we have Sundays. That's what the whole spiel about resurrection and Easter is about. This is why Christ came, to lead us there, to open the door to this. So we're not making this up here, but first. Second, Christ is inviting us to build the kingdom. And the Beatitudes, which we heard in the Gospel, are telling us this. He says, blessed are who? And then, so it's not like I need to get heaven in order I need to do certain things. Well, I only am nice to my neighbor because I want to go to heaven. Well, this is a strange reason, because we will see that there's something that needs to be sorted out, actually. If you're not doing it because you love your neighbor, there's a problem. It's better to do it, even though for whatever reason, but so the Beatitudes tell us what sort of attitude we need to have in our heart in order to actually prepare ourselves for this. So this life means, in my relationships to my neighbor, to the brothers I'm living in community, to the people I'm dealing with day in, day out, this is for me the way to get ready for the communion of saints. And not just in heaven, but here. So when Christ says the kingdom is near, that means I'm giving you the tools which you need in order to start heaven here, right now. Get it started. It's not going to be as perfect as in heaven, but you are called to build the kingdom here and now. So building the kingdom doesn't mean we need to get as many people as possible to sign up as Regnum Christi members, which is also a good thing to do, but it doesn't mean that that's what's bringing the kingdom. The kingdom comes about when we live our charism of charity. And we help people to love, and first do it ourselves, to live this charity, to overcome those limits which we put with bad choices, which are selfish and not focusing on the good of the other person. When we start to disentangle or take away the blindness of our eyes and start digging and understanding who the other person is and really wanting to unearth this treasure which I have in my brother next to me. When we start doing that, that's when we are starting to build the kingdom. That's when we are starting to form a community of saints. And that's how a religious community is supposed to be. We are supposed to start heaven now. We're supposed to be for the world out a sign, a symbol of how heaven can be. Certainly not perfect yet, but let's get as close as we can. If you honestly try that, how much different is this? And I think sometimes we get a glimpse of this. When we really enjoy community life, when we exercise service and enjoy how others serve, we can serve others and we can be there for each other. And we support each other, and we know we don't need to be afraid of each other because we are only wishing the best to my brother. This is how it begins. And that's what people realize. And if we live as a community like this, then we will get a bit of a foretaste of heaven. And then we can get excited about this. And then we can go out and get people excited for this. Because that's what people need to know. And when they understand this, they will also live their life differently. And that's what our mission is as apostles, to show them the path to heaven. Not just make sure you don't commit any mortal sin. Excuse me, this is the minimalistic approach which has very little to do with what Jesus is really trying to tell us. The point is, live a community of saints here and now. Build it. Let's build it together. Let's start today.